Hey, everybody, Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online, and it's Florida Tennessee week, so we're bringing out the big guns. An old friend of mine, a University of Florida guy, was a walk-on on the 96 team at the University of Florida that won a national title, but he's also got a unique perspective because he's covered both of these programs as a reporter, Florida and Tennessee. So Andy Staples, over the last 30 years, probably knows as much about this series as anybody alive, so we wanted to get him on this week. He's now with On3's college football expert for us, and we're lucky to have him. But Andy, thanks for coming on, buddy.
My pleasure, Keith. Yeah, this is crazy because it's still big to the two fan bases. It may not be as big nationally as it used to be, but in a lot of situations where you have a team like Tennessee that's had a couple of good years, and then a team like Florida that's not had a couple of good years, a lot of times the game sort of feels less important. It feels very important to both fan bases right now. I think a lot of it because for the Tennessee fans, the Vols haven't won in Gainesville since 2003, and that drought is very long and very frustrating. And then for the Florida fans, obviously they need a win right now. They need a big win that can say, hey, what Billy Napier is doing is working. Because if Tennessee comes in and smokes them, I think they're going to have a lot more doubts even than they had before, and that was already a bunch.
All right, Andy, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this game, let's just go back over the last few decades. Is there one Florida-Tennessee game or one moment from this series above all else that you just think, boy, that was Florida-Tennessee. That was awesome?
I've got a couple. So on that 96 team, it was a lot of fun because obviously Peyton Manning is Tennessee's quarterback. And so the scout team quarterback that year was a guy named Billy Young. And Billy, they gave him a Tennessee helmet for this thing. Normally you wear your own helmet and you're wearing, the color of the other team, except Billy was a quarterback. So he was wearing a quarterback practice jersey. So they give him this Tennessee helmet that's probably like 4 sizes too big. And it's just coming down over his eyes and he can't see while he's trying to throw. And we're trying to run Tennessee's plays and he's trying to be Peyton Manning. And meanwhile, he's a, tiny walk-on with a helmet that is covering his eyes and he can't even see the receiver he's throwing to. So they ditched the Tennessee helmet very quickly, went back to Billy's Gators helmet. And hey, it allowed Florida that scout team performance allowed Florida to what was the score? It was 35-0 at one point. And then Tennessee,
35-29, I want to say.
It ended 35-29. Yeah, that's the one. I believe Riddell, it's in the rain and Riddell jumps into the stands and you see the Tennessee fan go, so yeah, that was a fun. Before I got to UF, my senior year of high school, I remember watching the Florida Tennessee game and the hit that Lawrence Wright laid on Joey Kent, where it turned the game because Tennessee was playing very well. And then after that hit, everything turned and Florida ended up winning going away. And I remember when I got on the team, just asking guys what that was like and what it looked like in person, because I watched it on TV like everybody else. But that hit, I'm not sure I've seen a hit turn a game like that ever. And I was there. I was actually in the stadium for the Jadeveon Clowney hit on Vincent Smith in the Outback Bowl, and that was the most memorable hit I can remember covering. But I still don't think it had the same impact on the game that Lawrence's hit on Joey had.
Yeah, I think, I've been going to those games at Florida Field since I was a kid, and I can only put a couple of hits in that top group.
Let me throw another one. Yeah, I realize I'm dating myself by
go ahead
picking mid-90s, but the Tony George 89-yard interception return for a touchdown when he picked off Peyton Manning in 1997. I mean, that was a crazy one because that was the loudest I had ever heard the Swamp, and I think it was as loud or maybe a little bit louder during the Florida State game that year with the pass to Jaquez that set up the winning touchdown. And then it was louder than that in 2006 when Jarvis Moss blocked the kick against South Carolina. But as far as loud Swamp moments go, it's in my top 5.
Yeah, when you talk about loud swamp moments and big hits, that's what this series has been all about. I mean, a series obviously that they didn't play for many years and then started up again in 90, 91. And then, of course, they went to the division breakdown in 1992. But, Andy, going into this game, I was at the Florida-Utah game. It was difficult to watch at times, quite frankly. And I'm sure it was the same for people that weren't there. But what are Florida's biggest question marks going into this game? In your eyes? I mean, you follow this program very closely. So, in your eyes, what do you think?
can they establish the run? Can they have a run game where they're getting a push up front and the backs are gaining yards, and it's not switching to a screen game to simulate a run game? Because that didn't work against Utah. It won't work against most good defenses because it makes you so one-dimensional, and it makes the defense easy to call. So they've got to be able to get a push up front. Kingsley Equigon is back to start at center. That should help a lot. But of course, Tennessee's getting Cooper Mays back at center. So it's kind of a wash there. But that's Florida's offensive line has got to get a push up front. Otherwise, you're asking Graham Mertz to win the game with his arm. And that's a tough thing to do, especially if you've got to keep pace with Tennessee's offense.
All right. And then, Andy, if you're a Florida fan, what should give you some confidence? Maybe it's just some hope. What would it be that's Florida, either something happening with Florida or something with Tennessee?
Joe Milton had a real shaky start to that Austin Peay game. I think he was one for his first 11. That if he's spraying the ball around and he's not accurate, Florida has a chance, because either they're going to miss plays that they should score on, or he's going to airmail something and it's going to wind up in a safety's hands, and you're going to have a quick momentum shift in Florida's favor. That's the thing Florida should be hoping for, because if Joe's not accurate, Florida will have a chance in the game, because they'll get some shorter fields, and essentially Tennessee will not have the pinball offense that we've come to expect from them under Josh Heupel. If he's accurate, that's going to be a problem, because they can hit deep balls on you in a heartbeat. And all of a sudden, you can try to limit possessions. You can try to control the ball on the ground, but they'll be able to score in 1 minute and 40 seconds. And that becomes a big problem.
All right, Andy, you and I have both been all over the SEC schools. You've been to more than me. You've been across the country as well. And in the SEC, this is just my personal opinion. You're the expert here. I think Florida fields the edge that Florida gets from playing at home is maybe one of the top 3 edges in the SEC. I'd put Auburn and LSU right in that same conversation. How big is it? Again, you've been a part of this as both a player and then a guy that's covered it from both sides. And you've seen a lot of these games in Gainesville and a lot of these games in Neyland Stadium in Knoxville. How significant is the home field edge for Florida in a game like this historically? We know they're winning a lot there, but
yeah, it's pretty significant. I think the Tennessee players would probably agree that when your stadium's really rocking, it's a big deal, because I think they beat Alabama in part because Neyland Stadium helped them beat Alabama. And now they've overcome that. They've gone down to LSU and won. Now, that was an early game. The LSU folks don't really get cranked up unless it's a night game. But they just took the air out of the stadium quick. And that's the thing. What they've got to try to do as the visiting team in this situation, because the Florida fans are going to be cranked up. Like, if they lose this game, especially by a lot, we may not see the Swamp like that again this year. That may be it for this year. But they're going to be cranked up 2-11 right off the bat. If you're Tennessee and you want to win this game, you got to do what you did against LSU and take the crowd out of the game immediately. So we'll see if they can pull that off. But the longer it goes and you're trying to run up tempo and you're trying to communicate on the field, because that's what a lot of their on-field communication, they're not huddling or anything. They're moving really fast and trying to get down and snap. It's really hard to deal with that noise and not have false start penalties and not have miscommunications when you're trying to get plays in. So if they don't jump on Florida, the crowd can definitely have an impact.
This is a tough one to ask, and probably even a tougher one to answer. A lot of these guys on the Tennessee roster, they won big games. They were part of big wins last year. But these guys on the Florida roster, I know they beat Utah, but there's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm beating around the bush here. Does Florida have the talent to win games like this?
It's a great question. It's a great question. And what I wonder is how much of Florida's best talent is young. Like, if we just, instead of you take the experience aside and just rated the players by their special traits, my guess is the bulk of the ones at the top of the list of special traits would be freshmen and sophomores. They'd be people from the last couple of recruiting classes or people they got through the portal. And the problem is Tennessee has a lot of those guys who also have the experience. And I think that's an issue for Florida is, how long did it take those young guys to get the level of experience they need to be able to compete in a game like this? Maybe it's now, but it's a lot harder when you've got a bunch of Tennessee players who, like I said, have gone to LSU and won, have beaten Alabama in a game where, you know, the whole world was watching. So it's a legitimate question. And it's really the heart of what Billy Napier's mandate is at Florida. And that is make the roster better, make it more competitive, compete against Georgia and Alabama and LSU for recruits. And I think you've seen him do that. The question is, how long is it going to take for them to then see the fruits of that on the field? It's not an overnight thing, but my guess is probably sooner rather than later, you're going to have to start letting those young guys just play and hope that their special talents carry the day, as opposed to the older guys who may not be as special athletically as some of the young guys.
Yeah, we've seen so many coaches stick with the older guys. You know, it's so hard for them to go away from that. Andy, the answer to this final question, we're joined by Andy Staples of On3. If you like this video, make sure you like it, subscribe, leave a comment. We appreciate Andy stopping by. And Andy, the answer to this may overlap with some of the stuff you've already talked about, but if Florida does this, it wins the game. What is this?
Averages 5 yards a carry, which I realize is saying a lot. It's asking a lot in any SEC game. But if they can do that, it means they'll control the clock, they'll control possessions, they'll control tempo. That will allow them to win the game. And it also will open up the passing game. That, you know, play action all of a sudden becomes much more effective. Graham Mertz is not getting pressured as much because you can't tee off on him. So that, I think, would be the surest way to win the game.
All right, Andy Staples of On3, college football reporter. We appreciate him stopping by. For Andy, I'm Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online. Make sure you check out Andy's work at on3.com, and make sure you stop on by Gators Online to check out all of our great coverage this week leading up to the Florida-Tennessee game. Andy, my friend, thank you so much.
My pleasure.